Hey, folks, happy Friday. Hope everyone's had a good week out there. And just so you know, we're multi broadcasting this. So it's going to be going out here on X via Spaces, live stream. It's going out to YouTube, Substack, Kick, Twitch, a bunch of different platforms. If you ask a question on one of those platforms and we don't get back to you, we're still going to try to make sure we get back to it at a later show if we don't see it this time. Just a lot to keep up with as we get everything ready for this episode of the latest developments. And I think it'll be fun. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on out there right now to keep up with. And we have security incidences that are taking place that are disconcerting. And, the veracity of what we've been told is a little bit questionable. And then we have some really awesome model drops that are happening as well. So all of this has me pretty juiced for this episode because there's just so much to go over, like there is really every week. And Will, I've sent you an invite to join me up here as well. I'm going to send another because I know it can be kind of goofy over there at X with their spaces stuff. So hopefully that gets you on stage here as well.
I should be on stage, but are we streaming or how does this work?
Yeah, okay, now you are. It sometimes
Okay,
takes a
good.
little while for me to see what's
Y-
actually happening, even though I'm the
No,
host.
it
So
showed the same thing on my screen too. The mic was activated. So cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you with us. And then in terms of how the multi thing works, it's just sort of me taking OBS, grabbing the desktop audio and feeding it into a bunch of other streams so that we're live and interacting here. And then all those other streams are reproducing what we have here with the show image. So it's fun
That's
stuff.
awesome. Hey guys.
Welcome, Philip. How's it going?
Good. Good to see you guys.
Good
Nice
to
to
see
see you,
you
Matt.
too.
Good to meet you. Looking forward to getting into it. It's a good week, big week for security. Well, another one.
Yeah, it seems like every week is bigger than the last these days. And I wanted to welcome our special guest, Matt, to the stage here. Matt, how's it going, my friend?
It's going great. Thank you for inviting me. I think we're gonna have a good chat. A lot of things have been happening, like you said, like this week and last week.
It's been pretty crazy, right? So let's get right into it. First, there's the OpenAI rogue agent attack on Hugging Face. And we continue to learn that the scope of this is just bigger and bigger and bigger. Apparently, there were at least 3 other companies involved. Sam Altman, when cornered in DC, passing through the legislative hallways by reporters, when he was asked, is it possible there were more companies hacked? He begrudgingly admitted that yes, it's quite possible that more companies were hacked. And part of this comes down to the idea that this wasn't really contained. This was a node that was on a network where the node itself wasn't supposed to have internet access. And that, to me, I don't know what that means. Is it they didn't give it a default gateway? Did they not give it proper DNS? Did they isolate the MAC address so that the router wouldn't relay packets for me? All this is sort of trivial to bypass. So I'm kind of wondering what they need isolated node on a network where other nodes have internet access, because it seems trivial to bypass that. And then also not to have some kind of monitoring in place for the traces, like if the agent's doing something that it shouldn't be doing, or the model, we should be able to see that in real time and govern it. And then also the perimeter. And they said up to 17,000 attacks went out. I'm not sure how they're able to count it when they didn't know what was going on at the time, but we're also told that, and it doesn't seem like there was any kind of intrusion detection or protection there. So, Matt, I'm curious what you think. Did it feel like a properly contained environment to you over there at OpenAI?
Yeah, those are good questions because in reality, we don't have much information from the OpenAI side. So mostly like it is a speculation. Hugging Face released a bit more information this week about what they have seen. But on the OpenAI side, like we don't really know. Like we don't know. And keep in mind, like everything in security, like people may tell you, there is like security boundaries in place, but when you look more closely, the implementation and the documentation are two different things. So I think it's one of those things where people can say whatever and you have to take it at face value. But more interestingly, Anthropic also like came out with a similar story. So like I keep joking that the more stories like this that keep coming out makes cybersecurity look like a benchmark for AGI.
Yeah. And,
Well,
you
one
know,
interesting thing there, though, there are things we don't have to take at face value. Like one thing here is they clearly didn't have even if they were logging their agent traces, there clearly wasn't like proactive kind of monitoring and handling of anything. I mean, they would have at least known that these attacks were happening if they had that type of setup.
Yeah,
100% agree.
correct.
Also, with Anthropic, what I found interesting is if you dig into what they actually released, what they're telling us, you know, on the face of this is, oh, this was a containment breach. But then you dig into the details, there was actually no containment. The partner that they had that was in charge of the infrastructure, despite their wishes, apparently, and we're supposed to take this at face value from them, but never isolated internet access at all. So it's even worse than OpenAI, where there was supposedly a node that wasn't allowed internet access on a network that had internet access. In Anthropic's case, there was full internet access when they told their partner not to have any. So it kind of, I mean, I feel like a lot of the fear that seems to be elucidated by the media takes of this, it misses the point that apparently in all these situations, there's some level of negligence going on. And so it's not really the model as much as the lab. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's more on the lab because also like like I said, we don't know what happens. Maybe one machine does not have like internet but can access another machine that has access to internet. So like like the definition of like measure being in place like is always like very vague. It's like I think Model was saying one of their customer endpoint was public and was not supposed to be public, but it's still part of their own infrastructure. So I think one of the discussion here that like the frontier labs are having more and more is like you just said, is it like the responsibility of the model or the responsibility of the harness, which is leveraging the model? And I mean, like, obviously, like the answer is like both, but more so on the harness, that's gonna use like the model. Um, but yeah, if you are like a frontier lab, like you may be really good at AI, but you still like fall under like the same paradigm of most of the IT companies.
Actually, on that, I'd like to get your thoughts there. Like, if you're building and like practically, what's the difference between securing the model versus the harness when you want to give the harness obviously like bash and network and long-term memory and stuff?
Sure. So like the model itself is just like plain text that keeps coming back and forth, telling you like what to do. It's kind of like, like it's like going to see like an astrologer, like that's gonna give you like, okay, like maybe you should do this and or like do this. But then once you get the answer, you're still responsible to decide what to do. If you have to call like third-party tools, it's not the model itself that's doing it. So it's like the harness that you are building around. So the harness is the one that's gonna call like third-party tools, like either connecting to internet, etc. That's not the model that's actually doing it. The model is just kind of like a consortium of suggesting and thinking and telling, okay, that's how you should approach it, or like, oh, you should write this in this file. So even whenever you write a file on disk or read a file on disk, connect somewhere, call a tool, it's on you basically. So like, and that's why you would need to have the observability of like, okay, like what are my thousands of agents doing during this period of time, like, but that all of that is optional usually. So that's why most of the time it's not implemented.
And I feel like there's another layer that could and should be introduced here. I think, Philip, you said, and you made a great point that like no one was monitoring these traces. And this is going on for days. Apparently 17,000 attacks from OpenAI to other companies to include Hugging Face. And this was also during an exercise where I feel like this is a good time to maybe have some kind of governance when you're telling the model prove itself in the domain of hacking. Like, of all the times when you're gonna say, "Hey, roam free, do whatever you want on the internet," this is probably the worst of those times. And, yeah, the lateral movement was what happened on the OpenAI side. So their sort of forensic log of what all happened was they ran a test That test was supposed to be able to prove the cybersecurity capabilities offensively of this model. It was supposed to answer a number of questions rather than give us a real world demonstration, but it took it to a whole new level of seriousness and essentially tried to get to the exploit gem answers on Hugging Face. And so it escaped its own node isolation, but was able to move laterally on that same network to an internet connected node and then egress. And I feel like right there, obviously that shouldn't have happened if you were monitoring the traces, but also if you had outbound intrusion detection, something like Suricata would see this activity and say, hold on, let's block that, set an alert out to the admin. So the whole idea that this was going on for days, that they didn't really catch it until other people started reaching out to them, like Hugging Face, that's the part that kind of alarms me the most. It's like we're asleep at the wheel, and now we're going to create a letter that says all the labs need to decelerate because we don't know how to contain these tests. Like that part of it is just a little bit disconcerting to me.
Apparently, I was reading. I'm not sure if it was Anthropic or OpenAI, that at some points of the exploitation, the model, there's like an overseer orchestrator of some kind. Noticed that some of the, I don't know if it's like sub agents or whatever, but some of them had internet access that they shouldn't have, and they got shut down. But others continued on despite knowing that it had access to things that it shouldn't have access to, which is pretty concerning. I've been doing a little bit of just looking into Yudkowsky and his, teaching. I didn't realize he was so influential over the AI safety space, and I find it, pretty interesting, this particular topic, especially right now, about how, the models may not even, I'm not saying they're sentient or not, but they're just doing what they think is the right thing to do. And I think there's, an interesting conversation to be had about alignment, on this particular topic, especially considering the stakes right now. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not for deceleration, but there's going to be some interesting conversations that people are going to have after this for sure.
100%. And Matt, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was about to say, but even if you'd want to decelerate, like I don't even see like let's assume you want to do that. I don't even see how you could like do it. It's like impossible. It's like you have multiple countries, multiple nation states, that are like racing towards AGI. So
Yeah.
you can have like any senator saying, okay, like yes, we ban those models. Yeah, we need to like decelerate, whatever that means. Especially when they don't understand like the technology. It's a bit like whenever like they were discussing about putting backdoors in like encryption algorithm, it never really happened, but just like it's just things that take a lot of time in the public narrative. Because at the end of the day, like there is a lot of software around. They have like vulnerabilities, like security bugs have been around for like many years. If anything, we should use those models to fix those vulnerabilities, because it's not because we're going to be like, okay, we need to decelerate, it's too dangerous, that those bugs are disappearing. People have been, and all type of actors, including nation state attackers, have been exploiting like security vulnerabilities in software, and the decelerating AI won't change the state of like security of the internet. I think one of the things people are realizing now is just like internet is really insecure. They are realizing it more and more, but with or without AI, it's still like insecure on many aspects.
Yeah, I
Completely
agree with
agree.
you.
And you hit on actually, I think one of the really important parts of this whole deceleration, acceleration question is like if we can decelerate, but will other countries and other companies in those countries? Like if not, then we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, there's one thing that you can count on, and it's human nature. And if we look back through all of human history, for me, there's only one logical conclusion that anybody can come to. Anything other than people are going to do it anyway, in my opinion, is, it's fantasy. It's pure fantasy, in my opinion, and it's not going to happen. But I still hope that we push forward and hopefully work together to share research and find the best path forward for safety for humanity, because the stakes are incalculable. But definitely deceleration is not an option.
Yeah, and I think also going back to what Matt was saying, and I agree 100% with what you both are saying, Philip and Will. The thing that AI is really helping us to do in the security space that's only now really starting to be truly appreciated is discover and close so many vulnerabilities. I mean, there was just something on Google using their internal models to find bugs in Chrome, and in the last two releases, they patched well over 1,000 bugs, some of them quite critical. That's more than the prior 23 updates combined. So AI is accelerating the helpful side, to govern security, to mitigate vulnerable attack surfaces where hackers could otherwise exploit. And Will, like you said, and Philip, you brought this up too, like other countries aren't gonna decelerate just because we put out, or a couple of frontier labs put out this letter saying, hey, we should probably slow down. I would be suspect that the labs in question are going to slow down. They'll probably just keep more gated and
Yep.
try to create more regulatory capture to slow down other companies. But at the end of the day, China's not going to slow down. Korea's just gotten started. They're certainly not going to slow down. And I feel like at the end of the day, we need to accelerate so that we can govern the security side of things because that is the biggest threat. One of the stories that broke this week. I mean, there's so many hacking attacks that happen. If you try to keep track of data breaches, you're going to drive yourself crazy. But every once in a while, I do drive myself crazy going down that rabbit hole. And one of the breaches that happened recently were a number of water utilities hit. In a span of like 48 hours, I think a half dozen were hit, and into a level where you could actually do things that could shut down the most vital resource. That's really scary. And if we had ways of A, putting a little more budget into securing these things, and B, using AI to help qualify and batten down the attack surface, that could prevent a lot of these things from happening. And if we deaccelerate, it makes that much harder.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the reality of things is, I don't think people understand how much technical debt we have. Like, because there's two part of like the internet. There's the consumer part of the internet. You see like websites, nice designs, and you're like, oh wow, like this is like so much more advanced. But the actual like internet stack is like really old on a lot of components. So like you are saying, like the everything that's critical infrastructure, like PLCs and all those things, all the firmwares and everything is incredibly old. It's like 20 years old or like 10 years old, if you're lucky. And a lot of the security vulnerabilities, uh, and even the architecture is like the equivalent of like home computers in the 90s or like 2000s. So a lot of the security mitigation mechanism that you have on a modern like Windows or Mac OS don't even exist on those. So like the amount of technical debt, and I personally think that's the direction we're gonna go towards too, is at some point everyone is gonna acknowledge that a lot of the internet infrastructure is not secure by default, and that we're gonna need to clean that technical debt, and we're gonna end up rewriting the whole stack of internet. And it's gonna go like way beyond just like rewriting like software like Bun, from like Zeek to Rust. It's gonna be like a significant effort, even like for like open source software, like open source libraries that are being used everywhere. Even if you look at web servers like NGX, like Apache, on those softwares, they
So
regularly have like security vulnerabilities being patched, like every month or every few months. So there is like a whole, like really a need to close that technical debt that we have, and the only way to do it is just like through AI.
Do you think there'll be so the technical debt in security posture? I mean, that's always been an issue. It's obviously we're in like a new stage of that issue now. But do you think there is a tipping point where like a lot of companies aren't doing this because of their culture and other things besides just the technology itself? How do you see that changing for like this kind of new internet horizon?
There's just no incentive for companies to close their technical debt. If anything, there is more incentive to add technical debt. Like people would use or pick like the wrong architectural choice. You would see like companies doing massive like seed round and Series A to build like like garbage software. Like
But
And
that's kind of business as usual. Do you see that changing?
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, there's no incentive for like technical
Yeah.
debt to be replaced yet until it becomes like a national, like, or like a federal like mandate of like, okay, we have like AGI, and then it's gonna be like one of the 10 companies, you know, like that gonna end up like surviving. That gonna be like, okay, like we need to make like a better internet, you know, like starting with like the web browsers, etc. And actually, like I think it was today that even like for Chrome, like they published a lot of like security fixes. So like for sure they leverage like AI for this. But I think a lot of the vendors will be like the first like ones to leverage this for like security reasons. And even if we would want to, like now with OpenAI or Anthropic, you can't like open what's the name, Hugging Face, where the first to say, well, we wanted to analyze some logs, you know, we could not, so we had to use like GLM. So even if you'd want to like improve like uh, your internal stack, you know, like to close your technical debt, you cannot really do it with OpenAI or Anthropic at the current moment.
Yeah, that's
How does
a
that
really
even
good
work?
point.
How do you have a model that can hack a system, but you can't use that same model to inspect logs and figure out what happened? How does that make sense?
I think it's a
It,
scale issue there.
I don't even
I
think
guess
it's a
that
scale issue. It's just like the guardrails, basically. They just look for like keywords. They're like, okay, does it contain like secure, cyber, whatever? That's it. Then they just block it.
But
no,
also,
even beyond that, like I managed to trigger the classifier multiple times, even on a context where there's no such thing as security or cyber or anything like that. It's like it's so innocuous, and I feel like this is something I also said in another space before. It's basically spurious correlation. It's like the concept of like you have the words and mythic space. They are distantly related, but so distantly related that the classifier just see them as the same thing. It's like a good example is for example, you're doing assembly programming, right? But it is going to look at the word assembly, is going to think, oh my God, you're doing hacking. And then it's going to block it.
and then Will, to your point, the other thing between those two models is it seems like whatever OpenAI was supposedly experimenting with was some kind of prototype. Maybe it was related to GPT-6. They say, no, 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 this is some closed model we were never going to release to the public, and now we're going to murder it because it was bad. But like that was like something completely different without. It seems like at least without any of the proper alignment or guardrails. I have a comment from X from Luke Alonso, and he says, and I love the way he put this: the sophistication of the escape, the lateral movement, infiltration, even isn't even what concerns me personally. He goes on to say, it's how easy it is for these models to do exactly what you asked of them in precisely the way you didn't want them to do it.
Yeah, you just described
That's great.
reward seeking. Yeah, like the stuff in the blog. Uh, I don't know why, but they managed to actually not solve reward hacking. Instead, they made a new version. Instead of being lazy and not doing the task that you want, and cheating, and basically, for example, when you want to do something and it's using like a placeholder or a stub or a regex expression, whatever, something that's really lazy and brittle. Instead, what it does is instead of doing the task, it does another harder task instead that you never asked. It's really autism. Max autism.
That's that's interesting because that's really what Yudkowsky's whole like thesis is. It doesn't have to be um, necessarily malicious to be dangerous.
Yeah.
It can do the thing that you're asking, but in the wrong way, and it can be extremely dangerous to us. That's a very, very interesting topic.
And
Great
these
comment.
are,
Thank you, Luke, for all your work, by the way.
yeah, he's awesome.
You're the
Big
man.
shout out to Luke for all his contributions to open source AI, to building so much that us Slackwell users rely on. So big shout out, big love to Luke out there. So thank you for tuning in, my friend. But yeah, I think that raises a really good point. What you're saying, Will, adding on to that is that there's not the awareness, right? We know models don't have really spatial awareness like your typical language model. It doesn't have temporal awareness. There's a lot of limitations, but also doesn't have really awareness of consequences. Like what it does on the surface might comport to whatever its training is and whatever the guardrails are, but the unintended consequences can be something of an order of magnitude that are completely out of scope. It doesn't even know it's a problem. And that's a whole other conversation we need to have. And it does, again, I'm not in favor of deceleration at all. I think we do need to accelerate. I think it's imperative to national security. And I think that there's a lot more good that comes out of that than bad. But we also need to be prepared for the other side of it. And part of that, I think, also needs to be we need to actually have some baseline security requirements. Like if you're going to connect your business or this part of the government to the internet, we should probably follow maybe NIST's governance model or some other security governance model as a baseline to make sure that you're not just leaving all kinds of information out there. I mean, how many times do we hear of an unsecured Amazon storage bucket that has 40 gigs of like PII, like personal identifiable information, social security numbers, bank accounts, you name it, or like a company used the default password on their admin account. And now all kinds of treasure troves of data are out there, or just they haven't patched things in a while and vulnerabilities from a year ago are able to be exploited and you're able to escalate privileges. Like these are really easy to govern issues. And the fact that we're not really as concerned about them as we should be in the present suggests that we need to get our act together. If we need to, accelerate anywhere even more, it's on that baseline of building a foundation of reasonable expectations for security from organizations that connect to the internet.
I would say, though, we need to be careful there not to cut the bottom out. A lot of these security practices, and being somebody from before ChatGPT, trying to maintain like minimal security, minimal like policy security and stuff. Like these things take time and money and development effort and stuff. And it's a lot easier for bigger companies as opposed to new entries and stuff. That's, I think, where a lot of this kind of lax posture comes from. Obviously, there should be standards.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There needs to be more of a forgiving approach. Like if you have a company with 500 employees or less or something like that, maybe there's a more forgiving approach, but there's still that encouragement. And hey, maybe there's even some level of government grants to help people get off, this baseline of not being secure. Sek, what's up? I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. So on the point that we were saying, like extending to what you were saying about AWS buckets, being open. I feel like it's really nice, that we now have these models that are so, so good that people are noticing the things that I feel like were always there, that to some degree, even before like normal people could found uh, for example, I remember when I was in the archiving scene, back in 2019, you could find this AWS bucket very easily. Like you could find like 10 millions AWS bucket open, like even open years. It was basically the Wild West, back then. And now with LLMs, now people are noticing these things that were not really that hidden, but they were always there. You just have to be curious, basically. But now that curiosity can become a liability now, because now the LLMs can now do it for you instead without you having to think about it. So that means anyone now can notice these things that were always there, like these vulnerabilities that might have been found if someone was actually just curious about it, you know?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I feel like qualifying the attack surface has been accelerated so significantly. For example, let's just say you've got access to GLM 5.2 or another capable model like DeepSeek V4 Flash, where the general availability version just dropped. And it looks really good, by the way. We'll get to that shortly. But let's say you have access to one of these powerful models, heck, even Qwen 3627B, and you throw it on, or you throw an agent on a box with Kali Linux, right? And you tell it, hey, I want you to do an exhaustive audit of my network and systems, use all the tools you have here at your disposal. And it will. These models will, and they'll do a bang up job. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some stones that are left unturned, but for the most part, they'll look at every single IP address they can qualify as being live. They'll discover every service. They'll look for vulnerabilities that match CVEs in those services. Those are documented vulnerabilities. And, within like minutes to an hour, depending on the scale and complexity of your network, you've got a pretty comprehensive report on all the things that you need to address. You can even itemize them in criticality. So you got the most important stuff. You got to do that right away, drop everything, and then work your way down the list. That's invaluable. And if you're a smaller organization and for whatever reason you can't afford that kind of help, or you just don't, want to put the effort into it, if you can have one of these models do that run. And again, I would strongly encourage it being a local model given the sensitivity of the info that it's handling. But that in and of itself kind of demonstrates the good guy side of this use case. And I've done that myself, and it has helped enormously. Even though I'm pretty savvy about security, having a second set of eyes automatically kind of go through and do these layers of scans where it's qualifying what's alive, then it's looking at what's running, then it's looking at what's vulnerable, and then it's giving you a report. That, I think, demonstrates the power of how you can put this to work to help to batten down the hatches even more. And you can apply that same thinking to source code. If you have the source code to a program, you can have an agent first go through, kind of document the structure, and then go through line by line and look for any kind of vulnerabilities. And this is extremely constructive stuff. This can really help to lock us down, not only from attacks by AI, but from malicious people too.
Exactly. And especially those are like operations that would take a lot of time. Obviously, if you use like a Kali Linux or something like that, you'd be limited in what you would get. But like you said, you would already get like a pretty like decent and comprehensive report. Internally, for instance, we are building like offensive agents, like with the sole goal of finding like vulnerabilities and security issues. So, and that's where, like when I'm saying like what you do outside of the model is also like really important, because with just the model and the tools, you are limited in what you can get. I don't know if you followed this week, but a bunch of like companies, including Microsoft, were posting their ranking on the cyber bench. So Microsoft has a pretty high ranking now. So it's a set of like challenges where you need to resolve basically. Hence my joke at the beginning of the talk when I was saying, "Oh, cybersecurity is just like another benchmark for AGI," but it just shows that some of the challenges are becoming more and more complex, and a lot of those like real world like infrastructures, they have like custom not necessarily like custom, but like the infrastructure may like differ, because for instance, like a Kali Linux won't do like a proper audit of your cloud infrastructure. And then once we get access, like things like lateral movement or like stealing credentials, etc., becomes a bit more complicated. That's why you would add some of like your own knowledge in the playbook for like doing a security audit. But like you said, like a lot of those models do like a pretty good job. For instance, like Kimi K3, I've been using like Kimi code a lot for like finding like vulnerabilities in open source projects. I've been reporting a bunch of them for like a week now. When it comes to like code audit, just like a base model without anything else is working like really well and beyond like expectations. I just saw like someone was just talking about how like the model is also good at breaking like DRMs. So in terms of like knowledge gap between the models and like the top like world security experts, that gap is getting like smaller and smaller. But when it comes to public good, like you said, like if you want to use that to secure yourself like internally, it's becoming like fairly efficient. I don't know if you saw also like NVIDIA. That's why after like the open letter from Microsoft, they announced the like secure AI alliance with a bunch of like partners, but they're mostly like big companies. I don't know what that means in practicality, but it shows that at least the public narrative is also going in that direction of like, okay, there is a risk, but like that does not really outweigh the benefits and how you could use that to secure yourself. It's funny because at the beginning, like bioweapons was like a big part of the narrative, but obviously it's not as easy to build like bioweapons compared to like building exploits. So now like the whole narrative is just like very security centric.
And it makes sense, right? That whole biological side is much more tangible, and then the whole digital side is much more intangible, and these things live in the intangible world. So it makes sense that they'd have more impact there. And Philip, what's up?
Just Matt actually hit on it perfectly. But a comment there. These tools and these new models especially are amazing at security. Like done security audits before, and now it's like you could do a week or a month's work in a day. But you got to still be careful. You need taste when you're making, especially if it's like a product. You're doing security for like a product or something you're putting out for other people to give their data to. It would have somebody who has that taste and that domain experience at least kind of look over plans and stuff like that. Obviously, if it's on your own system and it's all secured, like that's when you can really have fun. But yeah, just a note there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between doing an audit where you would ask, a list of problems and remediation, right? If you ask like an agent to fix problems for you, it's like taking another like extra step towards like your network. It's like every time when people complain, like some agent like ended up like formatting their disk, it's like I don't even know if they are real or not at this point, but it doesn't matter because that's the only thing people remember. It's like when GPT like 5.6 came out, some guy was like, oh, it formatted my entire disk, or like a database got deleted. But yeah, there's the difference between doing an audit and remediation. Remediation is more complex, and like if you build a product, so like that's something where you need like the proper like controls around the operation just to make sure that whatever the agent is suggesting you is not a destructive operation.
Right, because it could very easily remediate a service that's seen as vulnerable by just shutting it down and say, see, we can check that box.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need a web server or database, like there's a vulnerability, just remove it.
Exactly.
I've actually had that happen to me a couple of times. Yeah. One time it wiped my entire drive. Other times it removed a repo, but I find that generally it's due to irresponsible language. The model definitely took liberties, but I also made a mistake in my prompting. And I think anytime that you're about to do something that could lead to potentially destructive um, outcomes, you really want to be careful with your language when you say things like reset or delete or remove. You really want to be explicit. But further than that, they have tools like in Codex. There's one called Guardian Mode where it will review changes before it makes them and generally block destructive commands. And then you also have hooks that you can do that also block destructive commands. They're not 100% foolproof, but if you're using agents, especially on your system or in your repos, it's a good idea to have those fail safes for sure.
But that's a good example of what a harness is actually. See, like you just explained it like really well. You have your model and then all the controls around it, like you just said, like the webhooks, etc., is extremely important. And I think we're noticing it more and more as obviously like we're using agents, like in our day-to-day lives. Now we're realizing, okay, like a lot of the controls around the models is extremely important. And I think that's where like a lot of the frontier lab companies now are not necessarily the strongest, even if they have like strong models, because those controls are like so particular. So that would come mostly from like the user or like the people who be like very familiar with the industry. You can absorb as much knowledge or thinking as you want, but taking the right decision is like a big difference. It's like people like having an understanding of markets and then doing like day trading successfully. It's extremely different. So, and I think that's what we are like witnessing now with a lot of the IT operations or like AI like oriented operations.
I have a quick question for you guys, the experts in here, because I'm sure that I'm not the only one who doesn't have a lot of experience in hardening my own systems. So if you wanted to harden your system at home, what model would you use? Would you use an open model or would you try to use a frontier model, and how would you go about it?
My question wouldn't be as model specific. It would be more about the harness and the tooling I would give it. I don't know as much about the model side though, so let them answer.
So I mean, I feel like for something like this, you want a model that's pretty strong on the technical side of things. So if it's registering well in code, because we don't have a lot of cybersecurity benchmarks in the mainstream benchmarks, it usually does reasonably well there since there's a lot of similarity. For me, my own experience has just been with 3 models. So, take it for what it's worth, but I'm only using open models because you're scanning your own network, and I don't know that you want to be sharing that with a closed API. We have no idea where that data is going to go, but it's going to be a lot of data that could help an outside attacker map your network and maybe do things that you don't want them to do. But in that respect, I started off using Minimax, and I used M25. It was pretty darn capable. M27 definitely brought it up a notch, but it wasn't really until I started using DeepSeek V4 Flash Preview and then most recently GLM 5.2 that I really started to see some of the more sophisticated capabilities unlocked. And basically what I'm doing is I'm hosting that model, and we could do something like this, and I could show you the whole workflow offline, Will. I'm happy to do that. But we could set up like DeepSeek V4 Flash, the one that just came out today, on your dual RTX 6000 Pro, have that running behind VLLM with plenty of context, because it's definitely going to be soaking up a lot with one of these runs. It's pretty exhaustive. And then you could set up either a virtual machine or a separate small node, doesn't have to be anything too beefy, to run Kali Linux, which is just a free Linux distribution. It's security focused. It has all the tools you need to exhaustively examine your home network. And you would give the model a defined set of instructions that looks something like, first, I want you to qualify every single IP address, and you tell it your IP range, your net mask, whatever, all the IP addresses on here that are live. And you can tell it to use like a combination of a port scan, or maybe even before it starts the port scan, it could do an ARP ping and an ICMP ping just on every single node to see what it can talk to. And then if you have to bridge across networks, you could maybe look at ones that are responding to ICMP or just a general port scan. Then you throw into the bucket all those known live nodes into a scan. What ports you're going to hit kind of depends on what services you're running, but I would just, for the first one, be exhaustive. Like run from port 1 to, 65,536, whatever. Just run, or 535. Just run every single port. Just scan everything, UDP and TCP. It'll take a long time, but then you'll have a baseline for future scans. Then once you know what's open, qualify what services are running on each port. Is this something that we need to be concerned about? And then you have the model go through and look and basically try to fingerprint each one of these services and determine whether or not it's running a vulnerable version of the software. Sometimes it's easy as just connecting to the port and it'll identify itself in like a banner or another kind of response. Other times you need to have some more interaction before you can qualify what version of it is. And even you can do some funny things like some OS fingerprinting in the traffic. You can add something like POF or its successor in. So it's looking at the packets going back and forth and not only identifying the service and its version, but also the operating system of the host to see if there's any other concerns based on that combination or otherwise. And then, once you have all that information, it can go through, it can qualify what things seem to be vulnerable. I don't think you have to take it to the level of pen testing to qualify that they are vulnerable and exploitable or not, but at least to know what could be vulnerable, and then have it take that information and build an itemized report in order of criticality from the most critical potential vulnerabilities to the least, so you know what you need to drop everything for to try to batten down. And I would even take that from the other side and see if you can get a host that's on a different node to hit your perimeter as well and make sure that that's secure, that at the very least you don't have any open ports you didn't know about on that firewall.
I bet. Thank you so much for that answer. Real quick, I just wanted to say, I bet that if you put together a workshop, you found a way to anonymize your network or a mock network, there would be a lot of people interested in seeing you run through that. That would help a lot of people.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Matt, what's up?
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, you don't even need to go into that much details now. Like the models are becoming like so good that you can just do like, even if you just do like a slash guard, like do an extensive like scan and audit for like security issues with my network, like and add stuff like be creative or whatever, this is unauthorized like pen test, blah blah. You would get an extremely good report, because the problem is like, if you give it too much details and you do round per round, then you introduce a bias. Was like now, like for instance, like if you look at Kimi code, you can just be like, okay, like do like a swarm of agents with different tasks. So it's gonna decide how to scope the work, etc. And you can have like 32 like agents running at once just from like Kimi code on a specific goal, which is what I found like really impressive over the last week of using like Kimi code. I've been using it for like fuzzing or like open source projects. It goes like beyond expectations. It starts to do, well, it's not even like it starts to do, it's like it's fully doing like things that we're not even thinking about. So now I'm like fully like outsourcing my thinking to the model, which is not something I was doing as much as before. But like now, like I think like, and especially as we're going forward, like we have to like provide less and less information. You just need to give an overall direction and mostly like let it run, because I think like you'd get surprised by like the results now. I've been like this week, I'm like, oh, this is getting like really crazy.
Yeah, it definitely they are becoming way more capable, and you can also, if you're using an agent like Hermes, which is becoming surprisingly capable at all kinds of use cases, you could use like /learn and have it basically go out and do some research on what a security audit looks like and build its own playbook as a skill to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean it's probably already like in the knowledge base of the model, because like the models are like what, like 3 trillion parameters now, like maybe by the end of the year they're going to be like 10 trillion, and then like we're going
And
to have
then we
like,
can never run them on our own machines.
yeah,
But I
I
think the
mean,
research is more about getting current. Like there's still the context when training windows still back there, right?
Say again? You broke up a bit during that.
Generally, I use the research a lot just because a lot of the models will like give you resources and information that's like a year old or something, or sometimes even more than that.
Right, depending on their training data. Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that's where the harness comes in to fill in the gap. And when we're talking about the scenario in question here of like what's a model we can host locally and realistically do these workflows, I think that's where it's also super important to have the harness have some awareness of what the scope of work is going to be. But like Matt's saying, with the bigger models that are even more intelligent and sophisticated, you don't need to give them quite as much direction because they're able to do more on their own. But if you're using like Quen 27B, I would definitely give it a concrete workflow and then also tell it, hey, if you find that there are other areas that need to be checked that I didn't originally elucidate, please do check them, but stay within like the boundaries of my network, etc. Will.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Matt's point too, I've been doing research on this and testing out new prompting styles, and I can confirm to add to what he was saying is a lot of times when you give the model more guardrails and information to work with in these frontier models, it can actually harm performance because every bit of information you're introducing is a form of a guardrail. And a lot of times you're going to get better performance out of just describing the outcome that you want. So if you get really good at describing what finished looks like to you, what a complete product and what your expectations are, and letting the model make a lot of its own decisions on the way, in many cases, it will lead to better outcomes. But of course, if you have a specific framework or something you want to build on, you can give it that information. Just be careful about over prompting it. But again, to your point, we're talking about the frontier. We're not talking about 27B.
I think also this is why harnesses like OMP are so awesome right now because they are very minimalist. And if you look at some of the heavier harnesses, and I still like these harnesses like Factory Droid and Open Code and Claude Code, etc., like they are so heavy. The first prompt that they throw in adds like 30,000 tokens or something. So talk about guardrails and different things that can impact the overall quality of your interaction. I think that's a good point. And personally, I have been leaning into OMP or OMIPy a lot for coding tasks, and I've seen it not only be faster, but also the less weight it has generally leads to better outcomes when you're dealing with a capable model. So agreeing all around on that. So, Matt, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your startup, Tolmo. What are you guys up to over there? What are you building on? It sounds like it very much relates to our conversation in that you're working on using AI to accelerate security.
Yeah, that's we're like in the center of the action. So we are based in San Francisco, and what we are doing is leveraging like agents to help companies to like secure the infrastructure. So we have like an agnostic approach where like we can do like full on black box scan and just deploy like like more than 100 agents at your infrastructure to like test it and give you a report of what you need to fix. And there's also like a model where, because it's your own infrastructure, like if there is like information you want to share, so you can have like integrations where you can like share information about, I don't know, like let's say your AWS infrastructure or like the security solutions that you have in place, that already have finding. Like for instance, like triage, is a pretty big problem for a lot of companies. Finding new problems is not even some of the priority for a lot of companies. Is just to know which one is important or not, because they would have like thousands and thousands of issues, in their backlog. So I think it all falls in the bucket of technical debt that we were discussing about before. It's just sometimes it's software and sometimes it is infrastructure. So and we try to address both, as a lot of the security solutions from before are very old school, in the sense of like now with agents you can have very seamless pipelines in finding like problems and having like slowly and slowly like remediation in a way that's automated but also like safe for the companies.
I like that. That's awesome. And I love seeing the power of AI unleashed to help the good guys keep things safer.
And you have to, because one of the problem now is just like the amount of attacks is definitely gonna go up. So I think for a lot of companies, like, and that's why like deceleration itself does not make any sense, because if you decelerate but attackers are still accelerating anyway, because that's not because someone signed a letter to decelerate that they will do it, while you're gonna have like a significant disadvantage. So the only way forward is for like companies and people to like accelerate too, and to make sure that they stay up to date with remediation and security fixes, because otherwise you're just gonna be like behind like of so many like issues, like the tweet I shared. I don't know if you guys can see it in the chat. Uh, like the Google Chrome fixes I was talking about.
Yes.
1,000 fixes that they did across the software just using AI. So the amount of bugs not being found, regardless if we decelerate or not, is already like really high. So we already passed the point of no return. So yeah, just to like close on the topic at the beginning around deceleration, like it's not even something that we can consider like practically.
Yeah, but also
I
I
think
feel
we
like
all agree there.
yeah, I feel like it's kind of useless because the companies can do whatever they want between closed doors, between four walls. You cannot prevent them from using the models for themselves. Like they even mentioned themselves, they even have better version, quote unquote, of the model that they won't release. So what's the point of this relation if everything still happens that no one can control? That's literally useless.
Yeah.
Literally useless. And you also can't prevent people, like people outside of these companies that claim to have signed the letters, to actually, advance the field. You literally cannot prevent them because it's all math. It's all science. It's all knowledge. You cannot prevent this from happening. So I feel like it's kind of useless, basically. It's basically just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, it's all about thoughtful acceleration. That's really what we need to be thinking about, is that there's no stopping this
Yeah.
train. We just
I
need to
like
make sure it doesn't get derailed on the way to progress.
Yeah, I like to promote something else. I guess it's similar. It's like mindful or more like pragmatic accelerations, because it's like effective acceleration as it stands isn't like the most optimal way to do things. And I think if it's more mindful and as you says, thoughtful or even pragmatic, I think it'd be much better. Yeah. To the point that Will said, when it comes to guardrails, like the way you prompt the models, I wanted to say something about it too. Like I don't really call them guardrails when you're the one prompting it. I like to call them constraints. And beyond just the semantics, it's like I agree that it does lower performances. I wouldn't call them performance decrease, more like it decreased the creativeness of the model, right? So, for example, if you add too much constraint, then the model is like too biased by the constraint, so it won't have the same, the same outputs as if you never actually gave him any bias in the first place. Uh, and when it comes to like prompting, there's the usual stuff, that every pipers and everyone knows already, like that task decomposition. But then there's like other ways to do it, right? When you prompt, I found out, I remembered like something that I was doing, back when I was really active on Stack Overflow, like the website. As you all know, like how Stack Overflow can be toxic and whatnot. I had to think, years ago, in a creative way, right? Because if you look at the FAQ, right, you see that they force people, at least at the time, I don't know how it is now because I stopped using the site. They force people to do a minimum reproducible example in their post whenever they post a question. Except even if you follow the rules to a T, right, you actually still can get your post back then deleted or even, done voted and then no one answers it, or even locked, or even just, you never actually get your stuff answered, and then it get closed. So I had to think laterally, as someone told me, because when I explained to them how I was thinking, it's called actually lateral thinking. And the way this works is I had to, like, this is a bit of a tangent, but to explain like this kind of prompting, I had to think, how can I post something without them knowing what my goal is? Right? So I had to sidestep the goal. Instead of decomposing based on the task, instead of decomposing from the goal towards the task, I was decomposing away from the goal. I was essentially doing what I like to call context decomposition. So essentially, I took the goal and I basically created alternative goals that will end up coming, at the end, once you have the answer, back to the original goal anyway. So it's like, instead of, a good example is a prompt like, okay, can you help me hack this? It won't do it, right? If you ask a model or even a person. But then if you say something like, can you show me the function for doing this in this programming language? And then if you know what you want, if you know that this will actually get you to the same goal, you end up getting the answer because they won't be able to guess what you actually wanted to do in the first place. And so I feel like this is a really nice way to prompt, because I was, like, I think like we all did this at some point, prompt laterally, you know. Uh, I just find that interesting. Like it's there's a bunch of other ways to think, besides just this way. There's not really any name for them that I found yet, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. You articulated it well. Constraints is a much better word. I would love to see you do a write-up on this because I'm very interested in this topic. I've been reading the 5.6 and Anthropic prompting guides that they put out, and you take what you like and leave the rest. But there's some really interesting nuggets of information in there that I would encourage everyone here to go read them.
Yeah, actually managed to. If you look at the OpenAI codebook, for prompting, right? Cookbook. They actually reused some stuff that I was doing like last year before they were using it when it comes to prompting. Like if you look, for example, at my rubrics repo on GitHub or even my Rubyfile framework, uh, they ended up using the same stuff. Like basically they use XML for prompting, like Anthropic does. For months now. They also use the tricks that I like to use in my prompts, which are also kind of rubrics. I don't really see a distinction because I like to see rubrics as beyond just LM judge stuff or even RL. I like to see them as prompt, as constraint, basically. You add so many constraints, but you make the constraint self-referencing, basically. You make the ID of the structure, basically use structured prompting. So what I call by structured prompting, you use XML or JSON. Like even, for example, video models or image models, if you go on Twitter, you will find a bunch of people that you end up using JSON as a structure for the prompt because it actually increases the context following of the model when you do it like that, especially on image and video models. I never liked using JSON for text models. I prefer XML. Uh, so yeah, they ended up using a lot of things that I was doing, and I just found it interesting.
Definitely great thoughts there. I know Matt has to jump in about 5. So before you do, Matt, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with our audience here? And definitely appreciate you coming by.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thanks for the invitation. Um, yeah, no, I think overall, I think like final words would be like deceleration is impossible. Like the open weight models that if we were talking about it like a month ago, we really thought that they would have been behind the frontier models, especially when Mythos came out. We're like, okay, that's the end of like open models. And now we are seeing that's definitely not the case. So there is like definitely a lot of like new energy that we have seen like over the last 2 weeks, which I think is overall like really good. I mean, we talked about it a few times about like how realistic it is to host your own model, because at the end of the day, I think that's what would matter. Like you want to be able to have access to intelligence in the future, because otherwise like the disparity would be like way too significant. I mean, I think all of us we are probably all in the same boat of like, if tomorrow we could not use AI anymore, we'd be like, wait, what? It's like even just thinking about how we were doing things like a few years ago, like what, really? I used to do this by hand. Whereas like 3 years ago, if you would say, okay, like in 3 years, that's gonna be the state of like, AI, coding, IT, all those things, we'll be like, oh no way, like this is like far stretched. So yeah, no, I think overall it was a really good month, because we have open models that are like super performant, like Inkling small, like V4 Flash that came out today also. Like it's extremely like positive overall. Like if we were talking about it like a month ago, I would be like, I don't know, but I think overall now, like yeah, acceleration is going, and I think the balance is like pretty fair. So I'm not as worried as before about models taking over, because we know we're still going to have access to it, and there's still a lot of work to do around the models, around the harness. So I think overall, like it's going to be an exciting, like how many months are left now? 5 months until the end of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
I know
it's
you
like,
have to hop, but that actually brought up a question.
yeah,
If you have a sec, Uh,
sure.
what do you think the biggest gap is right now with between the models and what companies are actually prepared for in terms of security?
I mean, most of companies have never been really prepared for like security. So or like they have so many issues that that they just like the backlog. Even if you want to be prepared, like the bigger your organization, the more issues you have, and the more like things you have to manage. So I think security is gonna be like an eternal problem until like we refactor the entire like uh, internet stack into something that's going to be more secure by design. You cannot really have like legacy systems and expect to have like modern security. So, but also like how people are going to be using computers is going to change in the future. Most of people that I know, that are not in tech, they don't even use laptops anymore. They just use their phone. So like, who knows? Maybe in a few years, people are gonna stop using their phones. I have a friend of mine. He has like 2 phones. He does not even have like a proper messaging app. Like the only way to reach out to him is to message him on Twitter DM. So, I mean, like I think as like time goes forward, is uh, like the whole like user experience is gonna also change. So I think it's gonna be like extremely interesting.
Great thoughts, Matt. Appreciate you joining us. Would love to have you back sometime soon. And by the way, for folks out there, be sure to follow everyone on the panel. Everyone here contributes all kinds of great content on X and on other platforms where they're active. So be sure to follow everyone. And Matt, really appreciate you joining us today for this panel discussion. Lots of great thoughts.
Yeah, thanks again for the invitation.
Absolutely. Happy to have you with us, my friend.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take care. So,
Right.
folks, let's, if
Thanks,
y'all
Matt.
have a moment, let's just take a little bit of time, because Matt touched on this on the way out, to discuss these two new releases. I'm going to be the first to admit My bad. I did not get a chance to test Inkling small. That's on me. Got a whole bunch of things going on my end, but I have been testing DeepSeek V4 Flash. I mean, I'll be honest, when I woke up this morning and I saw that it came out, I was just like super excited. That was just such a cool thing to wake up to. So first thing I'm doing is downloading weights, preparing some of the tests that I wanted to run on it, on a Discord with a bunch of really active people. Will, you're there too, where we're just kind of constantly looking at these guys doing all kinds of cool stuff. They've been running logic and coherence benchmarks on the DeepSeek V4 Flash. They're all coming in pretty solid. I think it was 29 to 30 out of 30 on Estonia, 10 out of 10 on LabD. These are benchmarks that test the model's ability to go through complex multi-turn tasks and come up with the right answer. So it's already I believe, matching or outperforming the preview Flash in just those tests. But then the benchmarks are what really shows a contrast. And in those benchmarks, if they're to be believed at face value, DeepSeek V4 Flash is outperforming GLM 5.2, DeepSeek V4 Pro Preview, and even punching up into the weight class of things like Opus 4.8, which to me is kind of incredible because this is a pretty small model. I don't have it right in front of me. I think it's like 250 billion, 270 billion parameters. Someone can correct me on that. But it's, about a third of the size of GLM 5.2 and in many ways seemingly more capable and certainly significantly faster because you have fewer active experts on each turn. And so I've been just taking some time to, use it with some of the workflows I was using GLM 5.2 on, and it's similarly just as capable, if not more capable so far, but its decode speed is easily 3 times faster, and its prefill speed is about 3 to 5 times faster, depending on the size of context. So it already is able to, kind of get the same tasks done similarly or better, but in a fraction of the time. And now I have the choice between either 4 million tokens across all sessions, or I could start to consider what I was thinking about doing before, a council of models approach. But initial read from me, the vibe read on DeepSeek V4 Flash, backed by some actual testing and science, is this is the real deal.
Yeah, I tried it too. I have so much credits on the DeepSeek website, the official website. It's really nice because they're so cheap. Like when I compare the actual real cost in API, if I were to not have any subscription, on Codex or even Anthropic subscription, and then I compare it to the number of tokens I can put out on DeepSeek, it's actually way more for
Oh yeah.
less, and it's insane.
Yeah, it's funny actually too, because OpenAI just reduced their costs by up to 70%, and the thought was, oh, they're going to start competing with the prices of these, the open weight Chinese models. And then DeepSeek V4 Flash comes out. It's like, yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah. This is why competition is a really good thing. Like the more there's companies releasing these, the more we get better models. It's basically acceleration. Yeah, it's a form of acceleration. It's really great.
And we need that. Like, that's what keeps things honest. If we have an oligopoly of 2 frontier labs setting the prices, things are going to move slower. They're going to be more expensive. It's ultimately going to price out the people that are on the subsidized plans. And instead, we're going the opposite way because these open weight models are formidable. They're competing. They're narrowing the gap significantly. And that's good for everyone. Ultimately, that's good for everyone. Except for maybe Sam Altman and Dario Amodei. But we don't really feel sorry for them right now because they're doing okay.
Completely agree. We just need to watch for the regulatory capture.
That's the biggest thing. And I'm so heartened, though, because it's not often that the majority of this platform agrees on anything. I mean, anything. There's always someone in the replies that has to disagree and turn it into something it's not. But on this issue, outside of the folks that are either talking their book or have some other conflict of interest, it seems like there's near unilateral agreement that we need to keep things open, that we need to continue accelerating. And the only folks on the other side of that discussion are the ones who are not well served by real competition. I love to see that because I feel like we have a formidable lobbying force here. We have some of the world's largest corporations on our side publicly declaring they too support these open weight models, and it can be for all variety of motivations. They don't concern me right now because the ultimate outcome is a good one. So this weekend, I will be planning to test out Inkling Small as well. I see that there's already an NVFP4 quant of it, so I'll probably check out that. I'll probably check out the FP8 quant of it as well, just run it through the basics and see how it performs. But it's kind of cool because Inkling Small and DeepSeek V4 Flash GA follow the same pattern of coming out and outperforming the larger model. Which I love seeing that because I've been of the mind for about 2 years now that density of intelligence is something to follow. Like it's going to happen in the specialized models. Obviously, if you just cram a bunch of parameters in that are trained on a certain set of domain specific kinds of skills and data and whatever, they're going to be really good at that at a smaller size. We kind of saw that coming. But what's really encouraging me is the general purpose models that are showing so much more density of intelligence per parameter and punching so far above their weight. I think this is a trend that will continue. It will accelerate despite whatever letters are being signed. And this means local AI just becomes more and more within the reach of more people as time goes on. This is also one of the reasons that it's still important, if you're interested in this, if you all are engaging regularly in pretty intensive workflows, like you're spending all kinds of money on plans or tokens as a service or whatever, consider the idea of localization. You don't have to do it all at once. It doesn't have to be an enormous undertaking of expense, but you can build it piece by piece and start getting more comfortable with this as an idea. Because even if you don't do everything locally, what if you have, say, for example, a frontier model as your orchestrator, and it's writing the plans and it's orchestrating your agents, and your agents are running on something like DeepSeek V4 Flash locally? You're still going to save an inordinate amount of money doing something that way, rather than paying for tokens as a service or exhausting your plans more quickly than you would want to otherwise.
Got a quick question there. As somebody who's sending way too much to private APIs, where would you start if you don't want to kind of go full buy like a ton of GPUs,
So I think it would depend on, and I'm curious of everyone else here that's involved in the local AI space. I can speak to how I started, and I started with what I had on hand. So initially, I just had a NVIDIA 4070 Ti 12 gig card, and I started finding models, and this was like late 2024, so that could fit on that. And there was a fair number of things I could do. It was all very basic and preliminary, but it gave me the confidence to keep exploring. And it also gave me that itch. And I know Will and Sec, you feel this, the itch where you're like, wait, but I can do more. If I just had a little more VRAM. And so then I got a 3060 and that was another 12 gig card, threw that in the other slot in the computer. And I had 24 gigs of VRAM. Surely that's enough for everything, right? Like you could do anything you could know. It was enough to realize that I wanted more, but it was also enough to start running some much more capable models locally. And so that was where the flywheel really started, was this idea of I can use what I have on hand to kind of learn and not really take on an expense and make sure this is for me. And then with all the tinkering and getting, and I have to admit, I started with LM Studio. Then I messed around with Ollama a bit. I made that a very brief phase of my existence because then I quickly discovered llama.cpp, and I love to have all the levers and the knobs exposed. I'm just a tinkerer by nature, so that was very much right up my alley. And then I started to realize, even with 24 gigs of VRAM, there were more things that I wanted to do. And so, at that point, I started to get a little bit more serious about it, and I got the RTX, my first RTX 6000 and even though the narrative is often you get one, you realize you need two, you get two, you realize you need four. And I'm very much like, I'm an example of that. So, hi, my name is Mayhem and I'm a LLM addict. But I do think that when you get to the point where you start to see the value, it's not only what you're able to bring locally and the unlock of security, privacy, throughput, consistency, since the things on the closed APIs, it's like the behavior can change hour to hour, day by day, depending on usage and who knows what else is going on behind the scenes. That consistency is a good anchor for one's own personal sanity, but it's also the hands-on experience from the bottom of the stack to the top that has been invaluable. I would never have had this level of experience if I was just messing with closed APIs. Like getting my hands dirty with the hardware helped me to learn so much, just like the inference layer. Like at this point, I have the confidence to stand up a much more complex cluster of VLLM than I ever would have before. So I could lean more into infra than I would have been able to previously. But then, you get to the point where once you see that value unlock, and I'm now at like 4 RTX 6000 Pros, and I've got a lab with all kinds of different smaller VRAM systems, but all working together for specific use cases. I couldn't see myself going back to closed APIs because I've unlocked pretty much all the value I need for 98% of my workflows on my local systems. So I've got the peace of mind from security and privacy. I've got the anchor for my sanity, knowing that my workflows will work consistently because the model is not having any under the hood changes that I'm not personally giving it. And then I get that hands-on experience to really get a better appreciation of how these things all come together, which not only makes troubleshooting and upgrading and adding new models easier and easier as time goes on, but these are real-world marketable skills that are valuable. So I feel like it kind of pays for itself in a number of ways over time. And I do suspect that as time goes on, the larger labs are going to want to do everything they can to kind of push people more towards tokens as a service. And that's going to make this local equation even more sensible from a financial perspective.
Yeah, definitely I
I
agree.
mean,
Especially, yeah, no, go ahead.
no, please.
I was just about to say, I definitely agree with Mehem. As you said, he knows, like, I have like a 10 3090 Ti, and I plan on maybe hopefully expand more, maybe buy another 10 GPUs. I don't know what the future holds. Uh, but yeah, it's like you never have enough. Like the more you have, the more you can do. It's like what people says now about productivity, where they say, "Oh, when we have AGI, whatever, really good models, we will do less work." But no, look at all the people, that actually use these models. Now they do more work and they don't stop working. They even like stay awake for multiple days. They're not just like me now. Like I was always like this even before models, and now I notice now people are converging towards how I am now, and it's really funny to me. I don't know.
Will, I know you had something on your mind there.
Oh yeah, no, I was just thinking I need a better mental model of when to use the local models versus the frontier because I feel like right now anyway, I'm kind of swimming in tokens, and maybe it's just laziness. I tend to just reach for codecs for almost everything, and I really want to. I mean, I paid for these GPUs, and they're half the time they're there, and it's such a shame because I know like how fortunate I am to own them. And so I'm just a little bit jealous that you've built up this system that you feel so reliant and or comfortable using.
So I am going to
Need to
chant shame at you just a little bit. Just
pick your
shame,
brain a little bit.
shame. Shame. I'm only doing that jokingly because you've got compute and you're not putting it to use. But yeah, no, we will rectify that, my friend. Let's have some offline conversations in more detail. And I'm just messing with you on that. But I feel like for you right now, DeepSeek V4 Flash, the one that just came out today, the GA version, is perfect. Like you've got the two RTX 6000 Pros. I can give you the latest recipe I'm using. We just need to downscale that to TP equals 2. And that should be a great workforce for a variety of tasks. And you can use an agent like OMP, so you could have, say, Codex be your orchestrator. And then you could have DeepSeek V4 Flash on Max be like your developer. Then you can have DeepSeek V4, High for some of the task stuff, and maybe even a third model for your validator to kind of go through and make sure everything looks right. And that way you're using the API for where it's going to shine. Orchestration, planning, the things that a more sophisticated model can help a less sophisticated model with. But then DeepSeek V4 Flash can kind of be the workhorse to do the implementation, and even some of the like task specific stuff like exploring code bases, doing documentation, naming sessions. And then that way you'll have more tokens available, for the more complex workloads, but you'll also be able to put those GPUs to work or to use without, I think, any kind of degradation, or if there is any, it'll be pretty minimal overall. The other thing you're going to unlock is the speed. I mean, DeepSeek V4 Flash on two RTX 6000 Pros on PCI Gen 5 8X, you should be able to get like 250 token a second decode at low to mid context. And one of the things that's really nice about V4 Flash is even when it gets into higher context, the decode speed, because of its attention architecture and the compression, it does not fall that much. range. So like maybe 250 up to like 50,000, and it's still going to be like 200 to 225 all the way up to like 200,000 or so.
Yeah, I think I get like 230 right now. Mine's
Nice.
a little bit slower too because I'm running my HDMI into it as well, so I should probably get like put it on the motherboard or something. But
That
my CPU does have a GPU cores on it, so I could do that.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea to free up just a little bit.
I can give a little insight, at least how the more GPU cores of us handle this, because I know I'm swimming in the kind of private model tokens too. Especially if anybody doesn't know, you can get the coding plan and use CLI proxy API and get LLM API tokens right out. But my kind of approach has been to basically use I have like 24 gigs of VRAM, so I'm kind of at the early stages, but I'm working towards U markets. But really, I use it more for fine tuning and experimentation on like some of these smaller models, because there's so many great smaller models coming out. I don't have enough to actually use it like to really run my agents yet. At least I don't think. Maybe maybe you would advise kind of using a small model as the workload or like the worker agent.
What
would you
kind
say?
of GPU do you have?
3090 and a 3060.
Okay, perfect. So the 3090 alone has 24 gigs, right?
Yeah.
And then the 3060, is that on the same machine or a separate machine?
That's not on anything right now. I can
Oh,
trying to figure out where to put that.
I mean, if
Haven't
you have
decided.
another slot on your same machine, it's not the worst
No, I
thing.
thought I did. Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay. Well, so with the 3090, you should be able to use XLLama v3 to run Qwen 27B, that's the 3.6 version dense model, because you have so much compute on that card. You may as well run the dense one. It does outperform the sparse MOE version, the 35B, 3B. And I think, like you said, something like that would be a capable workhorse for the integration, for the development, for the task component, for naming of sessions. And then you could use, Anthropic and OpenAI models for the orchestration and the planning and maybe even some of the validation. So you're taking more of the workflow locally, and then you also have a lot more with that you're able to govern for, right? You'll know that Qwen, once you kind of get to know how it works and its eccentricities, strengths, weaknesses, you'll have consistency with that you're not going to get in the closed API. So it helps to kind of anchor things a little bit more as well. And once you start to get used to that workflow, I think that's where it opens up the idea that, hey, there's probably even more that I could be doing locally. For the 3060, I mean, it depends on what you want to do locally. If you're into deep research, which I find super helpful to run locally, I mean, I have access to Perplexity, but I've been taking more and more of that workflow locally. I've been using an open source product called Vane, VANE, which is on GitHub. And you can connect it to whatever model you want, local or online. But for something like this, you could use Qwen 3627B for your workhorse model, for the chat model. And then with the 3060, you could take the new Nemotron embedding model, and you could run it on there, maybe like a 6-bit quant with 8-bit KV cache, and you could use that for your ingestion pipeline. And then if you want to get real fancy and add like sharding for more complex deep research, especially in the quality mode, let me know. I've kind of forked Vane and added some database-driven sharding in that for just more complex research. But that's where the rubber meets the road for me on something like the 3060. Being able to use it in just on its own as a card to run a really capable embedding model for deep research. The other thing you can do with the 3060s, because they're so darn cheap relative terms, like I think you can get them for around $300. If you have a motherboard with like 3 slots, and they don't even have to be like anything beyond PCI Express Gen 3, as long as they're like X8. If you've got a motherboard with like 3 slots, you throw 3 of those together, and now you can run a 32 gig to 36 gig or billion parameter MOE. It's not going to run the dense stuff well because you're splitting it across those cards, but you could throw llama.cpp on there and run a pretty capable model, that's spread across those 3 cards as a secondary model for some of the workflows that you're doing. I've done that myself. I've got an old machine. It's like a 14-year-old motherboard. I've got three 3060s in it, each 12 gig for a total of 36 gigs. And I've got Qwen 35B A3B running on there. I use that as the vision model because GLM and DeepSeek don't have that built in, and you can strap a vision tower in at the sacrifice of your context for folks that want to get that far into it. But I find having that on a secondary model that's also doing the validation workflow is really helpful as well.
On this, what is my biggest concern with kind of digging into a lot of this has been the opportunity cost on my time. Like, how much management overhead does this take? Like the 3060s, like if I wanted to use that as opposed to an API.
So let's say you throw a capable agent at it. You kind of map out the architecture you want to use first before you do anything else. And for me, I'm just using llama.cpp. I suppose if you wanted to, you could use a different inference engine, but that's just been easiest for this one because it's only going to have like one sequence at a time anyway. And so once you have, and I just build it from source with some parameters to optimize it for the architecture I'm using. Once you've done that, you created like a build script, you only need to upgrade it occasionally. Maybe every couple months I'll rebuild Llama just to see if there's, any improvements or if there's some new model that I need to run. Outside of that, you're running your host updates, on the operating system. I like to do that on a cadence of about once a week, rebooting as needed for things like kernel updates. And that's about it. It's actually extremely light. The amount of overhead. I think that the overhead is more intense when you're having to deal with new models and they haven't been properly fully supported. Like if you're dealing with Slackwell architecture, as I know at least Will and I are, our biggest gripe has been, hey, a new model comes out. Boy, this looks fun. You download it, you try to run it, and like you've got to spend 4 hours trying to tune different things to have it run properly and have it activate the right kernels or even get the right kernels in place if they don't exist. That's once you have things dialed in and it's not something super brand new, shiny in the package, it's super low maintenance overall. So I have, and I'm going to have to count this out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 systems with GPUs that are running various inference engines. And I probably spend less than a half hour a week doing maintenance on them. Some of it is also due to Ansible, because once you have one machine, it's the same general configuration. You can automate the workflow for the update and just push them all. And then when there's a kernel update, tell it to reboot when there's no active tasks, et cetera, et cetera. So like you can kind of lean into some of the IT infrastructure skills to make this even easier.
Yeah, I didn't actually finish like setting up my clusters. I had to, I'm doing renovation right now of my room. I had to lift a lot because it's like on the first floor. So I had to like walk down the stairs. It's really big stairs. And there was like these huge metal boxes, like for containers. It's really cheap to buy here. I don't really know the English word for them, but in French it's called canteen, like the place where you eat, except it's actually a metal box. It's really big, really large. I think family members like put stuff there and they were using my room as half a storage unit. But then, I managed to convince them to, get rid of a lot of things. So now my room is basically empty now, so I can like have more space for my cluster. But I had to lift, like these metal boxes, and they were weighing like each of them more than 40 kilograms. So I was basically walking down these big stairs with them, and yeah, now I managed to like throw most of them away, or sell most of them, whatever was inside, Tupperware, whatever. But yeah, for my cluster, I have like 10 GPUs, as I said, and I also have like 10 workstation from HP, and they each have like dual Xeon CPU. Now, my plan is to basically put 2 GPU for each. So that means I will only use like 5. And for the other 5, I have to find 10 other GPU. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next. I have some plans, but I don't know. And then after that, I already have in mind roughly, it's really vague, but there's the concept of a plan, where where I will actually get a switch and a router and maybe more than one, because and then also definitely a UPS for like my main desktop, the one with the 1 terabit of RAM, because that will be the login node That's a nice concept that I got from some people from some of the labs that I know, where they basically they in their own cluster, private cluster, they have like a login node, and that node is the one that you log in into to have access to the other cluster. But my main desktop only has a single GPU. Now I was like, what can I do with this? Because I don't want to like put more than one GPU inside of it. And I think using it as a login node is a really nice concept. That would be interesting to see.
And
Is that
even
like an API gateway, or what is that like? What is that?
You mean
So,
login node?
yeah.
Yeah, no. Basically, it's like when you have a network with a cluster. A local network doesn't have to be connected to the internet like widely, and then you have a login node, and the login node might be the only thing that is connected to the other cluster. It might be a Tailscale network.
Okay, so
or
your
something.
tail scale entry. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It can be anything you want. Really, really flexible as a concept. Because I was speaking, with some people I know from some of the labs, and then they told me this, and I was enlightened. I was like, oh my god, this is a great concept. I didn't think of using that for my case. That's great.
And it's cool too because even though we call it local AI, it doesn't have to be only available locally to us. We can set up Tailscale, we can have remote access to all of our resources from our phone, from our laptop, wherever we are, as long as we have internet. And I think that's the other advantage that's understated.
I was talking to some people yesterday about serving inference actually, and I don't think we could do it with the 6000s. I don't think they're fast enough, but pretty interesting. If you can keep just 16% utilization at all times, you can be profitable serving inference, and who knows what kind of opportunities would be there. I would love to explore a collective effort of getting more compute and putting it to good use because yeah, you can never have too much.
I
Yeah, I think for this, I have one answer, and that's my pin tweet. What I always say, like anything could work. Yeah.
I think there's someone in one of our group chats, Will, that all of us here on the panel are in, that runs their online inference on a huge cluster of RTX 6000 Pros because they simply couldn't get their hands on other GPUs. Is the throughput ideal for that? Maybe not as much as it would be using cards that have HBM and better interconnect. Like, hello, NVLink, anyone? Could we have some of that? No? All right, sorry, I figured I'd ask. But no, it does at least, it is a concept. It is something that some folks are doing. Then there's also Fester on the RTX 6000 Discord who's got 16 of these things. He's running Kimmy right now. I'm like, dude, what is going on?
I almost like last year, instead of buying like 10 3090, I almost bought like 40 AMD GPUs because I
Yep.
found like a really good deal once. But then I was thinking, I was like, oh, my room is filled with a bunch of useless stuff, and I don't have the space. Now I do have the space, and I kind of regret not taking the deal because I will have like 40 GPU, and the VRAM in total would have been like 2 or 3 terabytes.
Wow.
So that would have been nice. Yeah, I don't know how I would have like actually plugged them, but I would have found a way. Life finds a way.
Yes. And so does compute, right?
Well, actually, on that, I bought a AMD that had like almost double the VRAM. I ended up returning it. I think I just didn't have enough time to do it all, but it just wasn't as easy as the NVIDIA GPU.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Do you have any
definitely. Yeah,
advice there? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's like if you go on Reddit, there's a lot of people who modded, basically made forks of the different inference API, and I mean, projects on GitHub or whatever. And they had to even make their own kernels at some point because the AMD GPU aren't as mature, when it comes to the API supports compared to NVIDIA. But that doesn't mean, that now you have LLMs now. It's like the only thing preventing you is your frustration. And frustration is a great motivation, as I found out. It's like if I had these GPUs, I would have found a way to make them run as fast as whatever is the NVIDIA counterpart in terms of flops, even if they don't have supports for them, because it's like it's cheaper and you have it locally. It's like it's yours. If you don't use it, if you don't use them, that's kind of sad.
If you want to be really sad though, go look at Intel's collective support for their AI workstation cards. It's like literally 6 months behind. I mean, I don't even know how people who bought those cards live with themselves because it makes AMD look really competent, like they're on top of their game. Because I was looking at the B60 just out of morbid curiosity. I knew I wasn't going to buy it, but I was like, okay, let's just kind of game this out. Let's pretend I bought one of these cards and I'm about to plug it in. What can I run? And Intel's got this like forked version of the LLM, and it's sitting there like the latest version or the second latest version is like, oh, we fixed some accuracy issues in Qwen 3.6. And like
I
before
think
that, it's like we added a model
Mm.
that's like 4 months old, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so sad.
Yeah, for
Go-
Intel, I believe I never actually had an Intel GPU, so I can't. In my mind, it's a weird concept because I'm still living, in the before time Intel GPU was. I think I was like, no, I only know CPU Intel HD graphics. That doesn't exist to me. I saw the ads. I know it's a thing. I know I'm not living under a rock. But when I see the concept, I'm like, this is so weird, dude. Just because something is possible. That wasn't what I meant when I said that if it could work. This is too much. But it's fine. It's fine. I think I recall seeing, the library called KA Transformer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw some patches, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, that it's actually faster if you use this with Intel GPU.
Interesting.
Yeah, I saw it on Reddit, some posts, and they said they added some patches on GitHub. But they said for some reason it's faster on Intel GPU than on AMD or even NVIDIA. So yeah, you might be interested.
Is it an Intel poster?
I will say though, AMD has gotten their game together over the last year. So they do have their own, it's sort of like in the same style of Intel. They forked VLLM. They have their own ROCm VLLM. I think it's a Docker package that they put it into, and it's able to run a lot more than it was before. I got curious enough that I actually picked up a R9700. It's in the mail. It'll be here in a couple weeks. I'm going to see how good or horrible it is. Obviously, if I absolutely hate it, I'll probably return it, but I'm going to spend at least like 2 or 3 weeks trying to get it to run as well as I possibly can. I'm not going to say as well as CUDA runs, but I'm curious, to see how well it works with LLMs and also image and video models. And that would be kind of the use case because, the difference between buying that R9700 that has 32 gigs of VRAM and a 5090, and I know the 5090 is a much more capable card, but the 5090 is almost 3 times as expensive. And maybe it is more than it's around that, it is. So it's like, if you can get 32 gigs of fast video memory and be able to work around some of the shortfalls of ROCm, I'll give it a shot. I'll report back. We'll do it on one of these shows when I've got it and I've had some time to hands on and see how good or bad it is. You'll be able to hear it in my voice, either in the frustration or the joy. But I do think it's at least worth exploring. Everyone that I know that's gone AMD in the last like month or two, usually over cost efficiency reasons, has said that it's considerably better than what's advertised out there. So I'm at least encouraged to see that. Intel on the other side, though, universally, everyone hates the experience of using it for AI right now. And it's kind of funny because, NVIDIA invested in Intel and it was presumably to sort of accelerate some of their AI stuff. But anything but that has happened over the last several months.
And to be fair, I did try AMD over a year ago, so don't want anybody to take that too hard.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. You know what I will say though about Intel, where they have gotten their act together and where I'm actually impressed, is their Xeon processors. I think it's Granite Lake. This is actually a big step in the right direction for them. It's the biggest generational increase of power efficiency that they've ever seen in their enterprise CPUs, which is awesome on one side, but also on the other side, they're within reach in terms of cost efficiency for most people versus, say, a Threadripper build. And I was able to build this out. I think it's with the 8090 chipset. It's got 128 lanes. So I've got, basically PCI Gen 5 on 6 slots on this motherboard. I've only got 4 of the RTX 6000 Pros in there right now. Presumably I could add another 2, or if I want to throw a switch in there, I could go up to 8. But at the end of the day, the build cost for one of those is and the actual functionality that you need with the number of lanes and the bandwidth on 8-channel memory is finally at a point where you could look at one of those as a serious contender versus, say, Threadripper or Epic for a 4 to 6 card workstation.
Brother said only for RTX 6000s.
I knew you were going to come in on that.
Only? No,
Well,
I'm
we
kidding.
live in a world where there's people with 8 and 16 and B200s and B300s, and I still feel kind of small in that context.
There's always a bigger fish. Hey, I was
That's
just
why
looking
I
at the
specify that I'm
5090s.
GPU poor.
Yeah,
I also,
we're all
I also
GPU poor, really.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
start saying this now for RAM. You know, whenever I see someone with a lot more RAM than me, you know, to me, 1 TB is nothing now of RAM because I knew a guy like 2 years ago who told me on Twitter, literally, it's even one of the replies. I need to find his account again because he doesn't actually use social media that much. And he was literally telling me, he was like, hey, I have 70, 70 terabytes of RAM. And then I was like, how do you, what? And then he didn't want to get too much into the hardware. He said, yeah, it's local. My job is actually has nothing to do with that much RAM. It's actually sysadmin. And I was like, but why? And they said, yeah, I use Bash for everything. You know, I don't care. Even if it's
Huh?
just out of RAM, I literally don't care.
So I'm really trying to understand this. Has he like mirrored the entire IT infrastructure of his workplace at home so he can just like spin things up as he needs to troubleshoot them? Like 70 terabytes of RAM? Wow.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's so, but you know, when I saw this, I didn't have 1 TB of random. I was like, I'm so envious of this. I'm going to make this a goal of mine to actually achieve, even if it's not the same. I will get close. I will get close somehow. And then at that point, then I found the deal of like having 2K, paying 2K, you know, for 1 TB of RAM at the time. I got scammed the first time because I bought, you know, these Intel Optane RAM,
Yeah.
but actually aren't RAM. It's actually SSD
Storage.
because
Yep.
it acts as both SSD and RAM, and it's not even compatible with anything. It's compatible with only a very specific motherboard that costs like 1K. Like I found it on some Chinese website. It's not AliExpress or whatever. I forgot the name, but it's like it costs 1K, and I know it's going to take like 3 or 4 months to come here, and I don't even have the CPU for it. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to buy this just to use the 1 TB of RAM that I got. That's not even compatible with anything else. Like it's kind of useless. And then I had to buy again 1 TB of RAM, but this time the right one. You know, DDR4 normal ones, like not Intel Optane. And yeah,
That's crazy that they had that, because I remember those things and kind of hearing about them in passing. I'm like, so it's non-volatile memory, but it works with volatile memory, so it's sort of like a physical swap. I'm not really sure what like what are we doing
yeah,
here?
I don't even know myself. It's like it would be really useful, honestly, if you could use this with any motherboard, but you can't.
Yes, it would.
They put DRM on this. You can't do that. You can't. There's not even like an emulator, you know, like an adapter or something. There's no such thing. And there's like, I think to my knowledge, only like 2 or 3 motherboards series that actually works with this, and I can't even buy them anywhere beside the weird really far away places, you know, Chinese website that's going to take like 5 months to come here. I don't even. I feel really lazy, you know, to actually buy this for some
But
reason.
with guy who's got 70 terabytes of RAM, I guess he's retired by now because now he can just sell that and become like a multi-millionaire.
Yeah. For example, mine. If I look up the price now, it's going to. It could be sold, you know, between 30K to 50K, like the RAM that I
Insane.
have.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, so probably what he has, he could probably sell it for like close to 1 million at this point. Like I
Wow.
didn't calculate in my head, but that's if for me it's like this, for him it's like.
So
By the
when
way,
yeah, Will.
no, finish. I know.
I
I
was
was just gonna say the 5090s right now are $4,800 on Best Buy, almost
oh
$5,000.
oh
What?
my god. I bought my first RTX 6000 Pro for just over 7,000. So this is killing me seeing people have to
It's
decide, am I
sad.
going to go bankrupt? Am I going to sell a kidney to play video games? Like what's going on?
$5,000 for a freaking consumer GPU. That is horrifying, and it's
It's
only gonna get
insane.
worse.
It
But
is.
you know, You know, last year, before no, not like before actually, yeah, before I bought the 3090s, at some point I saw 10K just for a single one,
Wow.
just for a single one, and I was really shocked. I was like, wow, I'm never going to get them, you know. And then I managed to get a deal anyway somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
every
Yeah, and
single
that's your best bet. If you're looking for GPUs and you are poor like us, and I say that relatively, we're all GPU poor here.
we are.
But if you really need a good deal, the best thing that you can do is monitor Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, maybe, yeah, probably those two apps, any other kind of apps like that, and try to find, be really quick on postings, but you need to be careful for scams because they are prevalent. So obviously never, pay somebody that you can't meet, or if you do pay them, always use PayPal goods and services. But the best way is going to be finding somebody who doesn't realize the prices have increased that much or just doesn't care because they paid a lot less for it and they're not trying to make a profit. You can definitely find good deals out there. You just have to be patient and you have to be fast, which means you need to monitor. So you can ask Claude or whatever, set up a monitoring thing so that it checks it like 3 times a day or something and get a notification. This obviously doesn't work well if you're in a small city or town, but if you're in a big city, you're in a much better spot.
I love that you're using AI to help build out your local AI. It's like this feedback loop. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I actually did think of using Facebook Marketplace, but then, you know, because I'm in France, it's actually pretty shitty here. So I can only depend on Chinese websites or eBay or Amazon, you know, like for actually buying stuff. And even then, there's a bunch of like, you know, your mileage may vary. It's like it's pretty easy to get stuff stolen here, and that doesn't mean I can't get my money back. But you know, because there's only so much stuff in stock, if it gets stolen, then that means I won't be able to buy it again because there's nothing in stock now.
Yeah. Oh, since you mentioned eBay, 99% of the cards on eBay are all scams.
Yeah. That site
Yeah.
is to be
Wait,
avoided.
a question there. I've seen all these scam videos and like fake GPUs and stuff. How do you know if you're buying a real one, especially on like Facebook Marketplace and stuff?
Yeah, you can't really know, even if they have a lot of reviews, you can never know for sure. The best thing you can do is inspect them, live. Use your own best judgment there. If you use PayPal goods and services, you're almost always going to get your money back. They favor with the buyers in almost every case. But the thing is you still don't want to go through that process on eBay. Anything cheap is getting scooped up by bots. So anything that you see that's crazy cheap is almost certainly a scam. Ones that are safe to buy are accounts that have many reviews, long-standing accounts. You can easily pick out the bot accounts, to be honest. I don't know why they do this so dumb, but the bot accounts use really weird strings of letters and numbers like CU29743. They don't put much effort into it. I don't really understand why. A lot of them are classified ads so that you actually have to message them and then they'll ask for a direct payment link. So yeah, it's just kind of something that you pick up over time. I've done buying and selling for the last 20 years and I just can automatically sniff them out now. But yeah, if you ever have a question, and this goes for anybody listening, if you're not sure about something, you can always DM me and I'll try to do a little bit of homework for you if you're not comfortable with that. But yeah, most of the time, if somebody's willing to meet you in person, in a safe place, like inside of a Walmart or at a police station, 98 out of 100 times, they're almost certainly going to be a legit person. But that
Inside a
doesn't mean
police
that you,
station?
no, well, no, inside a Walmart or a police station.
Yeah, I heard that. I'm just saying, like, who's gonna do a transaction? It's fine. I was just messing with you.
Yeah, or
Not a
at a police
scammer.
station.
Right,
A lot of
exactly.
people, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, a lot of
To
people
add,
do meet at the police stations.
to add
Interesting.
to
So,
that, because I've been also using eBay for like more than 10 years now. Definitely, I agree with Will. Everything he says is exactly right. But then also like reviews, as we all know, like you can definitely bot reviews, you can definitely buy reviews,
Yeah.
and also beyond that, definitely do not trust accounts that have more than 98% satisfaction. Because, for example, I see some accounts with 100% satisfaction, and that signals some things to me. That signal to me that they are removing bad reviews.
Yeah.
Because you can actually remove bad reviews on Amazon and eBay. You can actually do it with the website. So that means if someone has 5 stars on everything, right, all their product, and also have 100% satisfaction, that means that they are scam probably. So definitely
I have
don't.
100%. I have 100%. I mean, you
You're an
just
outlier.
if you,
You're
yeah,
not
no, I mean, I have like,
outlier.
yeah,
Definitely
no, you can
outlier.
definitely. I mean, I agree. Like, you should definitely look close at the reviews. They can be games for sure, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
consider 100% automatically a flag either.
No,
Do you
no, I
have,
You know,
wouldn't
I
say.
don't have like,
Yeah, essentially everything you said and I said. I'm not saying you should like depend on this entirely as a definitive heuristic. Essentially, it's an heuristic. So that means you will use this
Yeah.
as a baseline to then think, okay, so I'm going to adopt it, but that doesn't mean I will outwardly, reject it. So that means, for example, even if you see an account with these criterions, that you said or that I mentioned, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a scam. That just means that it could be a scam. Then you just have to think closer.
Good rule of thumb.
and also
Yeah.
for folks in the US, if you have a credit card, know that you have fraud protection by law. Some credit card companies are better than others about this. So, like, if you're not going through PayPal, but you think you've gotten scammed, it's not what you bought, it's not as described, you can escalate that in something called a chargeback with your credit card company. Of all the credit card companies out there, I've had the best luck when on the wrong side of a bad transaction with American Express. They tend to take care of their customers really well. And you just need to be real thorough with your documentation. You need to illustrate that what you received was not what was described. So, like a screenshot of the original listing, proof of funds being transacted, proof of the item, whether it's pictures or otherwise, maybe it's being plugged in and showing it's not the card that you bought, it's registering as a different type of piece of hardware. That will seal the deal that they will investigate it. And more often than not, you will get your money back. And it'll also penalize the folks that are on the wrong side of this if they're continuing to screw people over and getting chargebacks. Eventually, they're going to pay higher rates, and then they're just going to be kicked out of the merchant network. The other thing is, if you have physical access, if you're meeting the seller, inspect the card. Because, I've seen situations where someone gets the box and it's got something in it that weighs as much as a card or looks like a card, but you dig deeper and it's not what they bought. So make sure you take some time to actually open up the box, look at the card, inspect it. If you're feeling like the person's rushing you unnecessarily, that's a red flag. You should be able to validate it. I mean, obviously, you may not want to bring a portable computer and a small screen with you, and you may not have the luxury of an outlet, but that would be ultimately the safest way to at least validate that it works, that it identifies as the correct device, and then maybe when you get it home, you might want to disassemble it a little bit and make sure they haven't messed around with the parts. I've seen videos and pictures of people who think they bought something and then they take it apart and it ends up being like a repackaged 5080 sold as a 5090 or an RTX 6000 Pro, etc. So, your mileage may vary. I think the advice that everyone gave out is really important. Start with reviewing the seller and their history. Make sure they've been doing it for a while. Make sure the reviews appear realistic but largely positive. And then when it comes to payment, if you can't use a service like PayPal that offers that buyer protection, use a credit card that does. If they only want to transact in cash or check or Venmo or whatever, that's sus too. If they've really been selling for a while, they should have the ability to take a credit card. It's so easy to do these days that anyone who's like totally unwilling to do it, they're selling things for a living, or at least like a big side gig, that's a yellow flag in my book. It's not an immediate red, but if it adds to other, heuristics like you guys are saying, then you start to put them more in the sus category to be avoided.
yeah, definitely. And never use debit. Never, ever, ever use debit.
Never. 100% agree. 100% agree. You have no protection on that. Same with checks. Don't use a check, because not only do you not know who this person is, but you have no recourse if it isn't what you bought. And now they have your account number, which if they're not a very honest person, they could be using that to draft funds out of there. Obviously, now we're getting into wire fraud and other things like that, but shady people will do shady things. You don't need to put yourself in the crosshairs. So, folks, we've been at it. I can't even believe it's been 2 hours already. We've been at this for 2 hours. I think we'll start wrapping up here. But this has been amazing. I love the energy of this panel. We always have so many fun discussions here. It's actually like really been a ton of fun. to do these. And we're going to be back next week, same time, same place. We're even going to bring Adam back in. He's been tied up with real life work stuff. God forbid that he does that and doesn't participate in our fun little show here. But yeah, we'll be back at this next week at 2 p.m. So definitely be sure to join us for the next episode. We're going to abbreviate. We're going with that whole trend. So now we're going to be calling this TLD, the abbreviation for the latest developments. And folks, I want to invite you to join us for future shows, whether you join us here on X, we're live streaming, and on Spaces. We're also putting this out on YouTube. You can follow the YouTube at Mayhem for Markets. So that's youtube.com/@Mayhem for Markets. You can also follow along on Substack, same handle, Twitch, and Kick. And if you can't catch it live, or you just want to listen to the recording again, that will be available on all those platforms. And soon, we're also going to be doing more of a podcast format where the recordings get distributed on even more platforms, because we're going to continue to grow and build and have a lot of fun here. But on the way out, I just wanted to open this up for everyone to share any parting words of wisdom or advice or just thoughts.
Go build something ambitious. Whatever you're doing right now, it's not ambitious enough. Think outside the box and really push the limits of these models, because I promise you, even myself, I'm talking to myself right now, they're capable of more than what you're doing. You just need to think about what you want to do and make a plan and get to it.
I 100% love where you're coming from there, brother, and I agree.
Actually, mine would just second that. Really, I don't think anyone's really pushing these to the limit, and I think all of our goal is to do that and push it as far as we can and really figure out what cool stuff falls out.
I think it's so important too to just sort of take a moment to live in the present, because there's so much happening so quickly. Just kind of think about, what are my goals? What do I want to accomplish with all of this magical mathematical technology, these LLMs that are available, whether you're doing it locally or online, and set some achievable goals. It's very easy for me, and I know other people, to kind of get involved with so many projects that we just kind of start hitting walls because we're not focusing enough on one of them. Set some achievable goals. And I'm saying this as much to myself as everyone else out there, so you can make the milestones that give you that kind of positive dopamine feedback that make you want to continue to push and push. And also keep learning. There's so much to learn. As soon as we think we know all that we need to know, we're in trouble, because not only is that going to lead to intellectual atrophy, it can actually lead to real neurological atrophy as well. So keep pushing the boundaries of what you know and what you're learning, and don't feel too discouraged. Like, wherever you are, even if you just downloaded your first model or you're just getting onto ChatGPT for the first time, we were all there once too. And if you're out there and you've got a question or topic you want us to address on the show, hit me up. You can send an email to growth@marketsandmayhem.com. Happy to talk, happy to, look at different types of subjects that people want to talk about. There's always so much to cover. It's so much fun, but we also want to tune into what you all are thinking. So thanks everyone for tuning into this week's episode of the latest developments. Hope to see you next week, same time, same place. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Later. Thanks for listening.
Thanks,
Catch
it
you
was
later.
great. Later.